Hello and welcome to this Private Equity Wire webinar presented in partnership with Novata, where we will be discussing the hot topic of the upcoming reporting season, gearing up with streamlined ESG processes. My name is Will Wainwright and I will be moderating this event on behalf of Global Fund Media. I'm very pleased to have a trio of experts alongside me, who I will shortly ask to introduce themselves. But first, a note on the topic. Getting value from ESG data requires a robust approach to collecting, analysing, and taking action on the metrics that matter. With the appropriate tools and resources, even the leanest ESG teams can elevate their strategies and tap into opportunities to create long-term value. As investors gear up for a new reporting season, this webinar will explore best practices for refining strategies and processes, overcoming challenges with data collection, the role of technology in streamlining data management, cybersecurity, and the outlook ahead. If you have any questions during the next 45 minutes, please submit them in the Q&A box. But for now, can I please ask my panelists for a brief introduction, starting with Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Essex. I'm the head of sustainability for AE Industrial Partners. We are primarily a middle market buyout firm with 6.3 billion under management. We focus on specific verticals, national security, aerospace, and industrials. And we have 23 portfolio companies currently under management, although we have more in our platform. We use Novata as our platform, and we collect data, a large data collection annually. That's obviously coming up soon, although we do have some smaller data collection throughout the year, but we don't generally collect more than a few pieces mid-year.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. And Johan.
Hi, everyone. My name is Johan Hill. I'm Director of ESG and Responsible Investing at Adam Street Partners. Adam Street is a global private markets manager. We predominantly are a fund of funds manager, so we do primary and secondary investments on the fund side, but we also do direct growth and co-investments as well as private credit. Adam Street as a firm is a long-standing responsible investor. We've been PRI signatories since 2010. And part of our ESG program and some of the priorities of our program include promoting greater ESG data transparency. So that's creating mechanisms for ESG data to be provided to our clients ultimately through our annual ESG report and our client-specific reporting, but also engaging with the managers that we invest with on ESG topics. So we do that through our annual ESG survey. We survey over 200 managers each year. Our survey is just about to begin for the next cycle. And that survey covers a range of different topics, addressing how managers go about integrating ESG considerations in their investment process and measuring it and monitoring it. But increasingly, it's also encouraging those managers to report on portfolio company level metrics. So happy to join the discussion today and delve into that more deeply.
Great, thank you very much.
I'm sorry, can I just say, I think Johan did a much better job of introducing himself than I did. I feel like I also need to mention we're a signatory in the UNPRI, and we also are participants in the ESG Data Convergence Initiative and have been from the very first year, and collect data on every EDCI and submit it, every EDCI metric and submit it as well. It's something we're committed to.
Great, thanks for adding that, Jennifer. And last but not least, Patrick.
Thanks everybody for being here. I'm Patrick Crawley. I'm the head of product for investors here at Novata. We service the private markets industry, both GPs and LPs, across private equity and private credit firms. We have around 7,000 portcos utilizing the platform to submit data back to the GPs globally. And so we have a pretty sizable number of large-scale asset managers and portfolio companies using the platform. All of the frameworks that were mentioned, UNPRI, and EDCI, are collectible through the platform. and we are actually now supporting some of the more advanced EDCI premium membership, and have recently become partners with EDCI, which, although not formally announced, I will go ahead and leak that out for today.
Great. Well, we've got our first exclusive piece of news already, so that's fantastic. Well, let's start by setting the scene here. I want to ask, starting with you, Jennifer, just for your main areas of data selection and the purpose behind that data selection.
Meaning which metrics we choose to collect data on. So how do we choose metrics? I like to think about the beginning of how we chose metrics. This will be our 4th year of using Novata as a platform to collect data. Prior to that, we did it, on like a spreadsheet. When we chose to upload metrics into Novata, we got very thoughtful about how we were going to do that. We started with the EDCI metrics as a baseline, and then we looked at sort of, a couple of things. We wanted to add additional metrics, and we wanted to make sure they were useful, somewhat simple, and also tied to a framework, right? So we picked specific buckets that we were looking at: safety of the employee, safety of the product, emissions intensity, and we then looked in the frameworks for questions that aligned with our areas. Then we took our metrics and we had a meeting with our responsible investment committee. Our responsible investment committee includes 3 deal team members, someone from compliance, someone from IR, someone from technology, and we basically showed all of the metrics we were considering them. We bucketed them under their areas, right? Safety, emissions, etc. And then we had an anonymous vote as to what they thought the most important metrics were to collect and would be most relevant to the portfolio. And then that's how they ultimately ended up in our survey. The first year when we got the results, we learned a lot. I think the example I think of is we asked our portfolio, do they collect data? Do they track data on product safety to the end user? We thought that was a good question, but it turned out it wasn't all that useful because like in engineering, what they do is they rework, and then they send it back out. So we had to rethink that. We spent a lot of time the first year asking for clarification on some items. And then we took all that data we collected, plus all the feedback we got from the portfolio companies, and went back to our responsible investment committee to redo the metrics. And every year, it's this time of year, we're rethinking which metrics are going to go into Novata. And Novata works with us. We have Emily and Alex, and they work with us, and they give us sort of a little insight too as to what other GPs might be doing, and of course what other LPs might be requesting that's new that we might need to think about. And then that all goes to the responsible investment committee as well for voting.
Got it. Thanks, Jennifer. Johan, from your perspective, obviously it's slightly different as a fund of funds. You will see how different firms, different GPs are doing this. There'll be data on your side as well. What initial reflections do you have on this topic?
Yeah, sure. So our survey has probably about 30 to 35 questions, and it's primarily qualitative. So it's kind of focused on some of the more kind of common aspects of ESG practice that we would expect our GPs that we invest with to have in place. So ESG policy, ESG training, things of that nature. And it's meant to kind of align with standards like the PRI, TCFD, SFDR, and so forth in some respects. So common questions that we expect to be very familiar to our kind of GP base, and that we get asked about from our LP base from time to time. We do that using a third-party platform as well, and that data gets. We try not to change the questions too much each year. They tend to be relatively standard, but that data gets validated by that third party, and we use that data as part of our diligencing process. So it helps us to diligence new investments. So we're looking at, instead of going through the entire diligence process right before the deal is closed, we just use that database that we have of these responses from managers to inform our deal teams, our investment teams, as part of the ESG process that we go through. It's also used in our annual ESG reporting. So we have high-level metrics that we collate across the universe of managers that we invest with. And we're able to kind of track performance over time. We're able to see how ESG practice is evolving on specific topics, which is quite interesting. And you can see that trend across geography and across subclass as well. So interesting metrics for us. Generally, what we've seen is continual improvement. That's encouraging. It's encouraging for us to be able to say that even to our LPs, that across the board there is improvement. And last but not least, we provide feedback to the managers that we invest with on how they score. So managers can see how they're performing and areas for improvement. So that's part of our engagement strategy. It's designed to drive continual improvement. So that I would say those are the kind of main features of our approach to our ESG survey. But yeah, hopefully that's clear.
Yeah, no, that's really useful. Thanks, Johan. Patrick, I'll throw it over to you. Obviously, you're working with a range of different firms. Is there a lot of variation in terms of, the data collection and what's motivating those firms? And maybe you could then talk a bit about the timeframes involved here.
Yeah, absolutely. So Novata has been around for over 3 years at this point, and what we've seen in terms of the metrics is actually quite fascinating of what people have collected over time. And we've kind of dug into the numbers, and there's a lot of commonalities in almost all of the metrics people use. And what our goal really as a company is to drive standardization, right? Because the more standardized these metrics are, the more useful they are. And the easier it is for our portfolio companies to answer them, which improves the data accuracy, which creates more value for the GPs. They can have more trust in the data, which then they can feel more comfortable sharing to LPs. And so when we look at the kind of data on the metrics, I think it's fascinating, the convergence and the overlap of metrics between different frameworks. We often call this the metric interoperability, which is, can you ask one question and have an answer several different purposes, whether that's SFDR, UNPRI, or EDCI, right? And I think that's a really important benefit of using a platform is you have that interoperability. You can ask the question once, making sure that you ask the question in the right way with the right guidance. That way portcos fill it out to their best way possible. And as I think about setting up for success for reporting, it really comes back to what are the metrics you have and making sure that they are rigid and structured, right? Rigidity creates scalability, as I say, and flexible, custom created metrics become hard to track over time because those evolve, those change. Whereas using an existing metric library, you get the benefits of research, you get the benefits of a time series analysis, you can link it across different periods. And so I always encourage people to try to converge to a standard. We work in private markets. It's already hard enough to get data from portcos. I envy people who work in public markets sometimes when you have so many data providers and feeds and everything that has QSIPs. We don't have that luxury. We live and work in a non-standardized industry. And the more standardized you can get, the more rigid you can get with the data, the better off you're going to be as you kind of think about your reporting process in Q1. The other thing I think about is the timing of when you ask these questions. So a lot of people start in January or February, and ultimately, it's a couple weeks for them to get the data back, review it, refine it. And then you have SFDR early in Q1, you have EDCI at some point in Q2. And so I always think it's helpful to have a working backwards plan and always bake in the fact that portfolio companies are usually delayed by a few days to weeks. We have found historically that 70% of portfolio companies do not answer by the deadline. 30% do. And so I think that's a helpful kind of tidbit for people on the call is you can say it's due in February 10th, but realistically kind of think about the real deadline being a few days or a few weeks after that. It's just how it is.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Patrick. That's interesting. So
Well,
let's talk a bit
Well,
about.
can I just echo that point that Patrick made about standardization? Because I think it's really important, particularly in private markets, that we seem to be coalescing around certain standards. We use EDCI ourselves. It's something that we signed up to quite early on, and we're actually also encouraging our GPs to submit portfolio company data using the EDCI template and other kind of standard templates out there. I think Invest Europe has one as well. But I think encouraging standardization helps to simplify the process for everyone and ensure comparability and credibility. And ultimately, the drivers for this are kind of multifaceted. We do want to be able to be accountable to our investors, our LPs ultimately, who are interested in how their portfolios are performing on these issues, including climate and other issues. So that's quite important. There are regulatory obligations that have been referred to, and I think that's also part of what we're trying to solve for is how do we provide the information that LPs ultimately need for their regulatory reporting, and in some cases we need for our regulatory reporting on certain funds. And thirdly, and I think maybe this is one for the future, is that when the data is good enough, how do we use it then to drive insights that we can use to improve the performance of the portfolios and drive change. So just thought I'd jump in there.
Yeah, no, thanks for doing that, Johan. Why don't we expand on that point now? Patrick, I don't know if you have thoughts on how this could have useful utility or outputs in the future, all of this data that we're gathering.
Yeah, I think one of the keywords that Johan mentioned is comparability, right? And so when you have standardization, you have an ability to compare across time, you have an ability to compare across different sectors, across regions. And I think that's quite important, is that standardization becomes a way to create comparisons. And I think in where we're at with ESG and data collection, it is really about comparisons and understanding how portfolio or company X compares to another one is really the only game we have, right? There's no absolute score. It is just a game of comparisons. And I think that is key, is that data standardization gives you that comparability. And I'm also curious to hear Jennifer's view of kind of the value creation part too, of how once you have this data, right, what do you guys do to deliver value to the portfolio companies and to the LPs?
So I was just gonna say, I started to interrupt you, I apologize. You say comparison. The most important comparison is the portfolio company to itself, right? The year-over-year comparison. And that's why collecting the same data year after year really matters. Johan said they're looking to drive improvement, so are we. And the only way really to do that is to collect the same data that you decide really matters. And then we take our data. There's a lot of steps to creating value, and I'm still working my way through some of the steps, but we take our data and we put it into a scorecard. And then we give them their improvement or not. It can sometimes go the other direction. So how did they do year over year? And then we'll show them the trend too for multi-years. We also will show them the benchmark, the applicable EDCI benchmark, so they can see, the portfolio company can see, one, how they did against themselves, and two, how they did against the industry. we also, because we invest in these specific verticals, we can give them our own benchmark, right? So of the 4 portfolio companies like you did this way. And one of the things, we do to drive value into the portfolio, I hope this isn't too granular. We build the scorecard and then we meet with them afterwards on Zoom to discuss how they're doing. And then I pick select portfolio companies and fly out and meet with them, tour the facilities and go through it with them. And I've found those in-person meetings, they generate ideas of how they can improve their performance live. It's like they prepare for me to be there and they've come up with a lot of really good ideas. I believe the next step for creating value is to give them additional resources. We're looking at adding like a PSO group sustainability person who can go out and meet with them and help them on some of the renewable energy project activity. That I hope will be the next step. But for now, it's mostly providing them consultants and providing them with resources so they know where they stand and where we're prioritizing them for value creation. Then we're also doing some additional things where we can, through Novata, we're collecting data on who's the HR lead, who's the ESG lead, who's the technology lead, and we're making small groups. Well, they're not so small because it's all the portfolio company HR leads, and they come together and talk. We're working on this. It hasn't been done yet, but we're looking to have them have group talks about, okay, so you have 2 new add-ons. What's the best way to integrate those new companies into your main platform company? And here are some, HR leads who have experience with this and can give you some guidance as to next best steps. So that's part of what we're using our Novata data is to see if we make these small groups, how can we best drive the conversations to help the portfolio companies to support them in their growth.
I think that's great, Jennifer. Let me just jump in right there. I think if all of our GPs were doing that, we would be in such a different place. I think that's really where we need to get to across the board. It's at the leading edge right now, but hopefully this becomes, table stakes in a few years where, everyone is doing that and looking for value creation and driving improvement. And with that, we'd have a wealth of information that we would be able to provide to those who, trust us with their capital to both generate a return, but also do so responsibly to be able to demonstrate that we're actually fulfilling that responsibility. So I think this is where we're headed, and we need to accelerate.
Yeah, no, thanks, Johan. Let me ask about the challenges here. What are the pain points that are faced through these processes? How do you navigate them? Jennifer, maybe you could start with the emissions angle here.
Well, we've decided to switch to collecting the emissions data through the Novata platform. That's new for us. Like I said, initially we were doing spreadsheets, collecting utility bills and calculating for them. Then we contracted with another platform, which that actually worked well. But then we were having to take the information from that platform and put it into Novata. But now Novata's platform it's good, and we're going to be switching to having everything done in one place. So really that's removing a pain point for us because we're getting it done in one spot. Another piece pain point is I know every GP faces this. It's the new hire number, it's the turnover number, they're not lining up. It's because the HR lead in Wichita looks at turnover differently than the EDCI, and what we do is we check all those calculations, and then we send emails. If they don't answer us, we have to get a Zoom call to get through it. And we prefer to do all that before the EDCI verification team looks at it, because we want our goal is to be like 100% accurate when it goes to them. Also because like Adam Street and other investors are asking us long before that EDCI verification actually finishes for our data, and we just, we don't want to have to change it after the fact. So it's verifying data with a small team that can be time consuming. I understand from Emily and Alec in our meeting yesterday that Novata's adding a feature where we can email them from the platform. So email the portfolio from the platform and say, you know, this doesn't add up. And then, I'm sorry, Patrick, I might be stealing your thunder, but I understand that there's also going to be an internal verification so that Novata is taking the relevant numbers for turnover and providing the portfolio company with the actual number, which would be a huge improvement for us. That's where technology really will provide a positive lift. So the pain points in my view are around verification. At first it was around getting the portfolio to provide the information, but now that we're going into our 4th year, our portfolio is much more on track. And like Patrick said, you know, 3 weeks after the deadline, I wouldn't put up with that. We give them a week and that's about it. But I give myself a week to just make sure I'm looping up with these people and we're getting it done. But again, we only have 23 portfolio companies we're collecting on, and we have control. So, you know, at this point, we know their numbers well enough that if something comes back and it's odd, I'm asking them right away. But for us, the deadlines aren't so much the problem. It's getting the corrections when they just look at a definition differently than we do.
Yeah, yeah. No, thanks, Jennifer. Patrick, what do you make of that?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a few interesting tidbits in there. The first I'll say is that when we look at the data of how portcos have submitted over time, it's fascinating to me the areas they have stumbled on. Simple things that we think this has to, like, there's, how do they mess this up, right? So one of the more common examples I use is total number of board members and the number of female board members. Sometimes they swap those. So you have 9 female board members with a total board size of 6. These things happen in actually decent amount of frequency, not in like double-digit percentages, but just enough to make it annoying for our clients and GPs to kind of be like, this is frustrating. So what we've tried to do is introduce better ways of validating the data as users submit it on the platform, right? When people are working through some of the workforce metrics, like around FTEs and turnovers and net new hires, we've noticed they struggle a lot. And our goal is really to have them perform no calculations or no math offline, and basically utilize the platform with better kind of workflow and modules to help them submit the data. So some of those logical validations are in place, and some of the kind of better workforce metrics kind of process is happening relatively soon. Because we did notice, and when we looked at the data of where people have made mistakes and tripped up, a lot of those EDCI, FTE calculations and metrics are a pain point. And one of the things I always think about, and I said this earlier, is how do you ask the question is super important. One of the questions asked in the EDCI metrics actually has 3 questions in it. They ask for your FTEs, or changes in your headcount related to mergers, acquisitions, and divestitures. Technically, that's 3 questions in one. So for us, thinking through that, it's about breaking that down into the fundamental units of that question, re-asking it to the portcos in a better, more streamlined way, and then doing the math from there. So it's all addition, subtraction, division. It's just an easier process. It improves the data quality. And we know historically, and based on the data we've seen, it creates pain points for our clients and for when they submit to EDCI.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. Johan, from your position as a fund of funds, looking kind of across the industry, different practices, etc., does some of that ring true in terms of the pain points, the technology being used?
It's kind of, you know, we operate at a very different level, so we're not getting into the weeds of specific, you know, let's say greenhouse gas accounting practices or FTEs and stuff like that. I think the complexities for us are kind of at the level of meeting maybe different requirements from our LPs. So different LPs have different points of interest and things that they're expecting. And you know, the way we try to solve that is to just make sure that our approach is kind of aligned with best practice, and then you know what we're providing is kind of market practice, and that should satisfy most of our LPs. I think what's also useful is you know, just making sure that we have case studies around value creation. I know, you know, this conversation is more around the metrics and the data points, which are, you know, which are super important. I'm not kind of taking away from that, but really we want to be able to tell the story of how you know, this work adds value or protects value. So that's also useful as well for us, because we do have to demonstrate that actively, how things improved, how are things improving.
Great, thanks, Johan. I'm going to throw in a question that we've had from the audience, and if there are any more, then please do submit them in the Q&A box. So one person writes, my committee would like to see different questions and data collection based on industry type versus a standardized solution. So I know we talked earlier about kind of comparable metrics, etc. This person is looking for something different, not standardized. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a great question. So I came from a kind of public markets background, and typically you tend to think of ESG topics on an industry-specific basis. So the questions might be different depending on the industry. The indicators are different. Just, you know, the nomenclature is very different across industries, and different topics might be material in different ways across different industries as well. So this notion of kind of having one common set of metrics across all you know, all industries and all companies and so forth was kind of new and different to me. But I think the rationale is that you're starting from such a low level, such a low base, that you do have to begin with some very simple you know, common building blocks, if you like, that everyone can agree on and try to begin to collect. So I think that's the reason why it's kind of evolved in the way it has. However, I think as we get more sophisticated, there will be inevitably more convergence, you know, across public and private markets. I think that's still kind of way off, but you know, I expect that will be the case. And you know, Jennifer, feel free to jump in, but I suspect you're already collecting probably different indicators across different portfolio companies, depending on what they're doing and what might be important for them in any case. So it's just about maybe aligning those with some of the more recognized standards that we see in the public listed space.
Well, I think we look at it like, as opposed to different industries, like they might be a national security or an aerospace company, but they do different things, right? One might be cyber technology, one might be manufacturing. And for us, that's where the differences come into play, right? Waste, scrap, that matters. In manufacturing, it's not much of an issue if it's cyber technology. So we are looking at it more from that perspective. We actually have a couple different metrics for the resource transformation companies, and they're really manufacturing companies, but you know, which vertical are they in? Aerospace, industrial, national security, that doesn't so much matter. What matters is what type of work are they doing? Are they manufacturing? Are they services? Is it an engineering firm? That's where the change in metrics really comes into play, because waste comes into play, frankly. And when I talked about like the amount of time we spent thinking about our metrics with the Responsible Investment Committee, a lot of it was around waste, because we want to understand, are they recycling their scrap? How are they handling their scrap? You know, you get some of these small founder companies, and you need to find out quickly how they're really doing with that, because it's a great area to create value and it's the right thing to do for the environment. And when you make those changes at a small company where they start recycling their scrap properly, getting paid for raw materials, not only are they improving their bottom line, but their employee base feels better. They feel better about themselves. So that's where we look at it differently, is what type of work are they doing. It also comes into play in that safety metric, right? Employee safety, that's different depending on the work that they're doing. And then product safety, that's different as well, depending on the work they're doing.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. Interesting. So in the final few minutes here, I'm just going to touch on a couple of things we haven't mentioned so far. So cybersecurity, hot topic, various insurance themes have come up in recent debates. Jennifer, do you want to talk a bit about the challenge there?
We are adding several cyber metrics this year. Our responsible investment committee already voted to add them, and we're using the relevant frameworks. Actually, Alec and Emily are working on the questions for us, but they are around, one, do they have a cyber lead? We have an insurance policy for cyber for our portfolio, but we're asking them, do they have their own cyber policy, and does it cover ransom? We're also asking, do they have a plan in case they are hacked? Do they have a written plan? And obviously, I think most people are probably collecting whether or not their portfolio has a cyber policy, but those are the questions. We've asked whether or not they have data breaches for a few years now, a couple years. We did in this last year find that it was particularly in the new purchases, right? The new platform companies, we found a few cyber breaches. So that tells us we need to also like make sure we have good consultants who move in and check what's happening. And as you put on add-ons, that certainly can create areas where you need to be looking at cyber. And that's not new news to us, but using Novata to collect the data and being able to report on that and see things quickly is really the best way to go, we feel. And I guess I can say we're adding the specific question about, does insurance cover ransom? Because I told you guys the very scary story. We were looking at a company to buy. While we were looking at them, they had a cyber attack and ransom was requested. And it was in that moment they found out their insurance doesn't cover ransom. So nobody wants to be that company.
Yeah, absolutely. Patrick, Johan, any thoughts on cyber and insurance specifically?
The only thing I'll add is that we have seen, as clients are refreshing their frameworks for 2024, more of these cyber questions coming out. So, anecdotally, it's growing, but also from the data we've seen in terms of new metrics added and also existing frameworks being adjusted. So especially in the VC space, you're seeing these cybersecurity questions getting a little more detailed, especially with respect to ransom and insurance, and really going above and beyond whether you have a policy or not. And it's more about what happens when that policy is put into practice now.
Yeah. We've had a question for Jennifer in particular. It's quite a long question. I'm not going to read it all, but it boils down to how have you structured the data review workflow?
Like the data verification, or?
Yeah, for verification and engagement, how do you work with deal teams versus ESG team members? This person is curious for tips about tips for how to streamline this review process across different internal stakeholders.
Yeah, that's a good question, because I do think the validation and verification is sort of I don't know, the more difficult piece right now. The way we're doing the validation and verification is, first our ESG team is looking at it, so our sustainability team. We also have an outside analyst that we have hired to just literally check all those turnover numbers, check board information just to go through and check all of the data before we send it to our responsible investment committee for a larger review. So again, we're trying to make sure everything is as tight as possible, but that doesn't stop that fat-fingered error, right? Like if you're an engineering firm with 7,000 employees, but someone, I don't know, puts in 5,000, someone has to flag that and say, well, we know they didn't have large layoffs over there, so this can't be right. And really, I think as a sustainability team, you want to be catching that before you're putting that to your deal team or your responsible investment committee. So it is my goal to have it be verified and within my own team before I get it out to them. But we are doing that within 4 weeks. So our data collection ends at the end of March. And then we want that verification first for our part to finish within 2 weeks. We're going out to the portfolio company, questioning, having Zoom meetings if we need to. And then after that, it goes out to the responsible investment committee and the deal team for a look. Does that answer that? Does that help?
It's very, very helpful. Thank you. So we're running out of time here. I just want to finish by looking ahead to the future. So we talked a bit about how this data might be very useful, longer term, how these benchmarks could be used. But I just want to talk about 2025. Are there particular issues and themes here that are on your mind? Any particular priorities in terms of this subject? I'll put that to you, Johan.
Yeah, for next year, 2025, we try not to change our data collection very often. There's some kind of minor enhancements that we're putting into our survey this year in terms of, for instance, with the EDCI template that users can upload via Adam Street's ESG survey to report on their portfolio companies, just to encourage the users to report non-anonymized data. I think with EDCI, some companies anonymize and some don't, but to be able to use the information, we have to have it non-anonymized. So just just minor tweaks there and some definitional tweaks around training. And also, we're trying to better understand who is responsible for the reporting within the organization. So things like that, I think. So not major developments for next year, but just minor tweaks, and hopefully we'll be able to have more useful information through the EDCI process.
Great, thanks, Johan. Last word to you, Patrick, in the final minute. What's on your radar for next year?
I think the thing I'm focused on for next year is improving some of the data review processes. So we've gotten enough data points back over the history of Novata to now get really smart with what are the things we can have users at the portco adjust upstream. And some of the compensations that Jennifer is making in terms of hiring people or having to spend additional time reviewing it, can we make sure that what is coming from the portcos is correct? Is it accurate? Does it follow validations, right? So I think that's our biggest kind of battle is on that front. And then ultimately giving our clients better ways to push the data back to the portfolio companies on platform for them to review, respond, and update. I think that's crucial, is you want to keep the people on the platform from a auditability perspective, traceability perspective, and also to create kind of foster the belief that Novata is the source of truth for your ESG data, and it can be used at any point in time. And then the last thing I'll say is benchmarks. I think it's really fascinating as the years go by and you have more data and you also are able to break it down by more industries and sub-industries and sectors and regions, and then different kind of providers, whether it's EDCI or whoever else. All of that gives you a better way to create value for your portfolio companies in terms of saying, using these benchmarks, here's how you stack up. Here's the things you can improve versus your peers, right? And I think as we start kind of shifting from data collection to having really powerful benchmarks, and all of that helps drive value creation to portcos, which is ultimately kind of one of the main goals here, is to help drive value to the portfolio companies.
Okay.
And also driving value means improving their experience on Novata, and making sure that our clients have the tools to adjust the data in real time. So I'm excited for next year. I think it's going to be an exciting one.
Great. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Johan. Thank you to all of you for joining us today. If you joined partway through, you can catch up. This will be released on the Private Equity Wire website next week. Feel free to share with any colleagues or contacts who might be interested. But we'll see you on the next webinar. Thank you very much.